terms of our agenda tonight, we have Steve Romer, who's our Parks Director. We have Maya Andrews, our Public Works Director, and Galen McNally, who's with Geoengineers, who has done some consulting work for us on this park.
All right, I'm Steve Romer, the Parks and Rec Director. All right, what I'm going to be doing is probably the first 15 minutes or so at the most, is giving an overview of the park and how it developed over time and the improvements that are there, and specifically we'll talk quite a bit about the stairs and kind of the evolution of the stairs. We'll start with that one. Eagle Landing Park was acquired in 2002. Actually, the park was the Branson property, as some of you may know, and a portion of it ended up being Eagle Landing Park, and the portion on the east side is actually an easement, our parking lot on the adjacent property that's owned by Mr. White, and that's the parking area that we own as an easement when we acquired the property. Gosh, this thing's being very particular.
Do you want them to do it?
Yeah.
They can do it.
Yeah, could you just do it for me? This thing's being very particular. So the park was designed in 2003. It was designed through a series of public meetings. Probably a lot of you might have attended those as well, went through the Parks Board as well as City Council. Quite a bit of input, and the design morphed several times and finally got approved, and what you see up here is the final adopted site plan that pretty much represents what you see out there now. Next. So after we acquired the property and before we could go into construction, we did an environmental review, and it's called a SEPA process. And it included review for the stairs as well as the rest of the park. And to begin that phase after the SEPA, I just want to note a couple things. The first one is that it was stated during that process that the slopes are unstable. It was very well known that the slopes are unstable. And then in the future, it could be anticipated that the stairways may be damaged or destroyed. And as you see in the slide, we're definitely talking about earth movement, and we even have interpretive panels in the park talking about earth movement. Secondly, the option of tightlining the stormwater was even discussed during that SEPA process, and it was ruled out. If this is reconsidered, I just want to point this out. If we reconsider this as part of the things we talk about over the next while, I just want to point out that we'll have to do another environmental review process to reintroduce tightlining into the park. So Geoengineers who's with us tonight agree that the small slides, the more active slide at the base of the stairs that we see are caused by wave action and not the city's stormwater. Several geotechnical reports have been done over the years. Landau and Associates have done one more recently that mentions that landslide activity likely originates at the beach and has continued as a result of continued beach erosion. And also Geoengineers and Shannon and Wilson also state that beach erosion plays a significant role in the initiation of landslide activity in the park. So there's multiple things going on that could be potentially creating the landslides at the bottom. But I think they all agree that the undercutting of the toe at the base of the slopes is definitely a contributor to the landslides that are impacting our trails, our stairs at the bottom. So construction began in 2004, and it culminated in a ribbon cutting in 2005, in June of 2005. Ever since that time, the public's really enjoyed the park. You go on to the next one. The public's enjoyed the park using several features. Probably the most popular ones are obviously the stairs, as well as that little eagle interpretive area to look at the eagle's nest that still exists in the park. But historically, the beach access stairs have been damaged by winter storms. And I don't know, those of you that have been using it for a long time, more than 5 years, remember the old stairs that we used to battle every winter. You could go to the next one. Pretty much every winter, the stairs would be battered by the winter storms in January and February, the high tides. And my staff would have to go out there and try to do our best to repair it. Sometimes we'd be propping the stairs up on the larger drift logs just to get the people down to the beach. And but it was an ongoing process. So we're always evaluating ways to keep that last bit of access down to the beach during those early years up until about 2013, because it was a constant battle there at the base. What we ended up doing was I worked with Earth Corps, got them under contract through a KCD grant, and try to we rerouted the stairs. So above that, those wooden stairs, we kind of did a side trail going parallel to the beach above the high water mark, and went to the north about 90 feet, and then introduced them back to the upper beach, just to the south of the white property there. And we thought that would be a good solution. But then very quickly, the new route only lasted about a year. And as continued shoreline storm damage caused the undercutting of the stairways and footings and made the last two landings unsafe for public use.
Who engineered the latest iteration?
One question.
Well, he's not, I'm just asking that for Phil
We'll
information.
finish the proposal and we'll have the opportunity to ask questions.
Okay.
All right. Next, yeah, so due to all the undercutting down at the bottom, the stairs were separating and moving down the hillside. So as we as staff were going down throughout this whole process over this a series of a year or so, we were seeing there's about a 4-inch play area in the bolting that was holding the stairs together. We'd slowly see it creeping and creeping and creeping until finally stairs are starting to break loose at those lower landings. And so the stairs are pretty much just dangling there above the slopes. And I have no doubt as these landings continue to be undercut and the landings start to tilt, I'm sure we're getting more and more of this separation and unsafe conditions on those lower staircases. So with concerns for the additional movement, the separation and all that, we needed to remove the lower two landings, and the entire stairway was closed to the public. Following the closure, we had a firm come in and pull out the last two landings, the two stairways and the bottom two landings. They were just about to fall into the sound on their own. There was pretty much no soil underneath them, and they were tilting heavily down towards the shoreline, so we had to take them out. So following the stairway closure, the public was getting creative, going around the blockages that we had up at the top and the signs that we had. And we'd go around and eventually get down to the shoreline. They'd make their own paths and get down to the shoreline. So this is starting to create a little bit of an erosion concern. But really the main concern was just the safety of the public going that whole length down on the kind of outlaw trails down to the beach. The other concern was because the slopes are moving, we had a lot of falling trees and debris. You can see a pretty large stump there that fell over, real right adjacent to some stairways, and that's still going on out there. This tree's leaning pretty heavily and falling pretty routinely down there, so we have concerns for the public safety down there. Seeing all the activity going on, the parks added additional barriers and signage, trying to do everything we could to try to keep people from going down there. And we even put, chain link fencing over the top of the staircases. We put chains across it, and as much as we could to reduce our liability, because we were having serious concerns about our risk and liability at this point with people going down there. But what happens pretty chronically ever since then, and it's still going on, is people are still. I had a council presentation about a week and a half ago now, and about 2 days before that presentation, I reestablished all the chain link fence and we put everything back up. We tried to button everything back up. Within 2 days, it's all cut off and torn off and thrown down the hillside. So it's just been an ongoing battle for us to try to secure and keep people out of there. We put up signs, as this slide shows. The sign on the right is kind of an educational one, explaining what's going on as far as the hillside, why it's a concern, and what the process is and why we don't want people out there. But then as the signs on the left are a little more blunt, danger, hazardous, keep out of here, no trespassing. So we're kind of trying all the communication techniques as far as explaining the problem, as well as being a little firmer. Our main goal is to protect the public and reduce, obviously, our liability. So lastly, I just wanted to say this. So this is a picture just about a month ago. The continual erosion down there. The next two landings are getting pretty close to going down the hillside, just like the initial ones did. So after years of staff time and resources, putting up the barriers and the signage and keep working on it, I'm spending a lot of our guys' time out there, which is fine, but people keep hiking down there, and it keeps being a concern of ours for the public safety and obviously our liability. And it's just an impossible thing to manage. We're kind of between a rock and a hard place with all the use going down there, knowing what's going on with the stairs, knowing we got the hillside movement, and that it's just not safe for the public. And we're kind of feeling we're between a rock and a hard place now with how we move forward, and that's why we want to have more discussion and maybe think of other options and what we do to move forward with this project. We had put in the city budget, it was approved actually in the 17-18 budget for me to come in and take out the stairs down to landing 6, which is about the top third of the slope. And so that money's been there for us to come in and do this. I could have done this project over a year ago to come in and take out half the stairs and create a terminal landing like a viewing point. But we decided let's take a little more time to evaluate what's going on. We know that this is a huge asset, that the public loves this thing, but we also knew going into it when this park was designed and we did all the environmental engineering work that it probably did have a time limit at some point. So we're at that point now. We're just trying to decide actually how to move forward, what the appropriate thing to do is to move forward for more of a long-term solution. And with that, that's what I've got.
Hi, my name is Holly Smith. I live 2 doors away from the park. I'm just curious, from the inception of this deal, who did the engineering on the stairway?
Yeah, the original design and engineering was done by Shannon and Wilson.
Did they give you a disclaimer when they designed it that it would only last for 10 years?
It was all very clear in their report, as well as in the SEPA document, that the hillside's moving and that there's no guarantees that stairway's going to last forever.
Sorry, can you speak up?
Okay, yes. Yeah, they didn't give us a disclaimer, but they were very clear in their reports and their geotechnical reports to the city. And also, as I mentioned in the SEPA, we mentioned it as well, that the hillside is moving and they couldn't guarantee the life of it. And they assumed at some point there's going to be damage to the stairway, as well as it could be total destruction of those stairways.
And so we as a city of Burien went forward with the project knowing that it was terminal?
Yes, the city of Burien went forward with the project.
And who made that decision?
The city council and the staff that was here in 2004.
Okay. And then knowing that, how come funds haven't been set aside to upgrade the stairway year by year to keep it safe and to keep it in use?
I'll try my best to respond to that one. From my perspective, I'm not quite sure how to restore stairs on a slope that no longer exists to get people down to the beach. And that's what's going on. The shoreline underneath the stairs and between the stairs and the shoreline are disappearing on me. So we're kind of struggling to decide how we can safely get people down to that beach and build a structure.
Vertically, you're talking about the last 50 feet or less?
Right now, vertically, yeah, probably less than 50 feet.
And the total span of the stairway is about, what, 200?
The total length of the stairway?
Total height.
The elevation of the stairways,
Seems a little,
that might be a little
might
much.
be a little much.
Yeah, maybe more like 150 or so, yeah, to the very top.
Okay. And so you're advising to take the stairway down based on your geotech and other studies?
Yeah, what I said at council a week and a half ago myself was, as I expressed, because of my concerns with the public safety and the continued use of those stairs, and the fact that we weren't seeing a good solution on how to get a structure down to the beach in today's world with permitting and the environmental concerns and the impact of the shoreline, that maybe we need to talk about taking the entire stairs out to keep everybody safe.
And so you're saying you don't have a plan for rebuilding the stairway and saving it up, or you're not willing to go to that length?
No, what I'm saying is I got capital money. My proposal 2 years ago was maybe we terminate the stairs where the geoengineers think it might be a stable area, as stable as it could be on a hillside, on a bluff along Puget Sound, and terminate the stairs at that point. I did get funding for that, but no, not for recreating the stairs all the way down to the shoreline.
Do you have a plan for what part of the stairway is stable, what's not, what can be left, what could not be, any options for reconstruction?
No, we haven't proceeded with that phase. We have a recommendation as far as stability of the hillside. we put some funding in place to pursue that study to look at those options and how we might terminate it, but no, we have not pulled the trigger, again, because I knew as well as everybody else did that this was a very important asset to the citizens of Burien, and we wanted to pause and take a look at there might be other options.
Right, but again, do you have any plan for repair of the stairway? Any ideas on which way to go with that? Any ideas on cost?
Not at this time, no.
Not even ad hoc?
No.
Nothing?
No, I can speak to maybe some of the concerns and difficulties with that, and one of them is current permitting would not allow us, and not just permitting, I should say, the grant that we purchased the property with required us to put a deed on it that states that we will not do anything that prohibits the hillside from eroding on and feeding the beach. And so we're not allowed to stop that movement from happening. We can't build a bulkhead, and that's in the easement. So that's out of the question. If you do something that pins the stairs to the earth and lets things flow around them, we've talked with our insurer about this, and that's still a public hazard because of the tree fall. So right now, even as the earth's moving, we have probably a dozen or so trees that are currently at risk of falling all the time, and it's a constant maintenance problem to deal with hazard trees also. So that's another concern with safety.
But that's something that's doable, maintenance of the trees. That sounds like that's your only concern, if you pin it.
Yeah, if we
in the
could-
bottom of the stairway properly?
Sure, if we could predict when the trees are going to fall, yeah.
Well, your guys are there every other day. I see the trucks drive by all the time.
Well, I don't see them driving by that stairway every day.
Well, no, but
Okay, let's give another opportunity.
I was waiting for somebody to come behind me, that's why I came behind me.
Okay, thank you. So I started off with a 2-minute thing. I don't know if that's going to work, but I want to give everybody the opportunity to answer questions with you. So if you come up with 2 minutes in mind, that would be greatly appreciated. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Brian. There's not very many people on the list, so I'm hoping that I have an opportunity to ask the important questions. I was wondering, Steve, if you could go back to the slide that shows the pictures of your efforts to keep people off the stairs.
All right, could you get me back there? Go, yeah, right there, that's probably good.
But no, you had it right there.
Yeah.
So, I live next door, and, we hear people climbing over the stairs of this and walking on the stairs because they just don't want to obey the rules. And I have one quick question. How much money do you think you've spent just trying to keep people from going onto the stairs, roughly?
Over the last 4 years, in the low cup, under $5,000.
$5,000, let's say $5,000. Okay, so.
Yeah, just we say that again in the microphone so everybody can hear on the recording. For sure under $5,000 over the last, since we closed this stairway. That's including staff time and then the rental of this fence material.
So here's my question, which I want to correlate. When I walked the stairs, one time a tree fell on the stair, and I noticed this lady tripped over the bent part of the stair. So I quickly went home and got my ratchet wrench, ratcheted the stair off because the stairs are segmented. In fact, when they were assembled, one man could have put these stairs up because they are an assembly. And so I quickly removed the 4 bolts, took my sledgehammer, bent it back, and put it on while the lady was still there. So we quickly repaired it. So my question is,
Yeah, really.
if you're concerned about people walking on the stairs, why not have somebody with a crescent wrench for way under $5,000 could have easily come down there and disassembled the stairs and removed them in a day so there would be no stairs to walk on. And then instead of putting your fence around there, you could have just put a fence all the way across to prevent people from even walking along the stairs. So the approach that you've had hasn't been very successful, but I think if you look, I went to the stairs today and I handed out some photographs, and I want to give you one. you need a 1/2-inch socket wrench, and one man by himself could completely disassemble these stairs, and there would be no worries or risks. We wouldn't have to pay $5,000 to protect. He could just put a chain across. That's a solution for now. The second thing that I'd like to point out is when the property was purchased, Shannon and Wilson's did a risk for you, the city, not you, the city. And I have a copy of that report. And in that report on page 2, it says there was no bulkhead on the park. But there was a bulkhead. And there is a bulkhead, and there still is a bulkhead. But it failed right after I moved in. And I alerted Mr. Chip Davis to the fact that the bulkhead had been failing and that it was going to wash out these piers well before there was any washout of any piers. I have photographs showing those piers with plenty of soil around them and no pin piles exposed. But this report, I want to just read it to you. On the subject property, the shoreline is unprotected. However, a number of logs ranging from 6 to 36 inches in diameter lie in the upper margin of the beach, offering some protection to the slopes. That's totally false. There was a bulkhead there, he missed it, and he didn't report it. A bulkhead has to be maintained by law. Just south of the property, a 4-foot-high rock bulkhead protects the shoreline around the concrete storm drain and the property owned to the Cedars Community Club. To the south strip of land, private residents, Joel, points out that they have bulkheads. So this guy certainly knew what a bulkhead was. He missed it. Now maybe he couldn't see it, whatever. But if you talk about a shoreline failing, the shoreline was never just a shoreline with a toe going to the beach. It was a bulkhead, and the bulkhead has been there. It was failed to be reported to the grant people. Now, Maya's right. The grant people forbid a bulkhead. In fact, if you read the grant, it says that you're not allowed to build a bulkhead. But they never were told that a bulkhead was there in the first place when they got the grant. So I spoke with them the last few days, and I have a few questions. The last time when you get this grant, you're required into perpetuity to maintain the structures that you put on the property. It says here, long-term obligations maintain the funded site and structures as originally funded. The last inspection was 2007. They've never heard that the park was closed. I spoke to them today in Olympia. They sent me a letter, which I've just handed out. And in that letter, it says that the last inspection was in 2007, and that they're now on their way up to do an inspection. They sent a letter today to the city, and they want to know what's going on.
All right, I just want to correct one thing. The park's open, the stairs are closed.
Let me read the letter from.
So that is something that we will follow up on. I mean, this is the first that we've heard of this, at least I've heard of, the correspondence
Let
that
him
you're
finish.
talking
Nobody's
about.
behind him.
Pardon?
Let him finish. Nobody's behind him.
No, I just want to
You
say.
interrupted me, and he was behind me. He would have let me have more time. So let him finish. Please.
I just want to say that that's part of what we're doing is when this information comes through, we will follow up on this.
That's
and-
fine,
and
but
come
let him
back.
finish.
Yeah, just let them both finish.
Please, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it says here, hi Diane, we heard today from Mr. White, one of your neighbors at the park, that the stairs to the beach have been damaged down to the bottom near the beach and closed to the public. As you may know, the city received 2 grants from RCO at this park, which include a perpetual obligation that it remain open and available to the public, to the beach. Attached is a copy of our standard notice that went to the city of Burien. I understand there's a public meeting tonight. Please let me know what happens. As you know, we are very busy. We will do a site inspection in the coming months. So when I wanted to in my questioning, we're going to have this site visit. We got this money. There's certain obligation to keep the structures there. So my next question is this. We have 9 city blocks of water drained into one pipe that is dumping on my property, which is east to the city. There are numerous videos of that water washing all the way to the beach. The critical area map that the city publishes says that's a seasonal stream with no fish. And it shows that stream going all the way to the beach. And indeed, it does go all the way to the beach. But it is not a seasonal stream with fish. It is a man-made conveyance of water from this storm drain. So my question is, or my recommendation. First of all, I also sent out a handout of helical piles with a company that is willing to not only shore up those piers, but guarantee them for life with a transferable insurance for far less than the $150,000 that you now have in your budget. But I wouldn't recommend that we spend that money until we figure out a way to plumb this water to the beach. I've also handed out pictures that show me standing in the ditches dug from this water, and I'm standing this high in these ditches. And as you know, every time it rains, there's thousands of gallons of water coming out of this pipe. So I've been told by Chip Davis 3 years ago that that problem was going to be solved and that they were going to plumb this thing and solve it. That hasn't happened, and I get it that it hasn't happened. Because there are permits. I know that you would have to get a lot of permits to get that thing to the beach. But that might take a couple of years. But if we're going to spend $25 million on Seahurst Park, we can certainly spend a little bit to save this thing. We can't do anything until that thing goes to the beach. So my recommendation is, until we can get it plumbed to the beach, send some carpenters down with a couple of ratchet wrenches. Disassemble the stairs, which would only take probably 3 days and far less than the $5,000 that you've already spent. Take the stair parts, store them in your storage yard, take that fence that you're renting that's costing a whole bunch of money, put it all the way across. That will keep people from, getting down there and crawling, and they won't have any fence to stand, they won't have any stairs to stand on. You won't have to worry about them jumping the fence and chaining and doing all of these things. While that's happening, you can let these helical pile people come in, give you a quote for the piers, and offer their full 100% guarantee for life, which I think anybody would accept. And then we can have our beach access back. I don't want to see the beach access go away because we only have one beach access, and that's Seahurst Park. The spirit of the loan of this thing was so that we can have a second beach access. And I applaud the city for buying the property and building a staircase. I know what creep is. I know what slope creep is, and if that slope had normal slope creep, those stairs would last a long time. I know what a bulkhead is. That bulkhead lasted 100 years. What happened? Why did it wash out? It washed out because that storm drain we're talking about has been increased constantly in flow over the years. plus weather changes and other things, but you can't stop that flow. Let's talk about the wattles and the dams. You got a bunch of money to put wattles and dams to try to stop that flow. If you go down there, all those wattles and dams are washed out because the flow from that pipe is so great that you can't stop it. Last thing that I want to say is, I would like that storm drain dyed to see where that water is going. Geoengineers can do that dyeing. They do it all the time to trace water. I've dyed it. I know where it's going. But there's no way anybody's going to accept my observations. I'd like to have a professional dye it because there's 2,500 gallons a minute coming out of that pipe when it's raining. And I see the Parks Department up there all the time. As you see in these pictures that I've handed out, you've gone from one pipe to two pipes. And now if you go down there, they're washed out. Who's going to control the flow of this storm drain?
So if we could, maybe I'll have our staff have a response to some of the issues that you discussed. Are we okay with that?
That sounds great. Can I finish now? I said, can I finish now?
Well, I'm going to let my staff answer some of the
Okay,
questions
I'll
that
wait.
came up.
Yeah, I'll try to remember some of them. So let me just start with RCO, the Recreation Conservation Office, and how they'll work. It sounds like, since we've notified them that the stairs are closed, is RCO, it sounds like they're sending us a letter. What they do with all of our projects, they come back and monitor. And the city of Burien has a lot of projects funded by RCO, so that's not unusual. They're reasonable as far as natural things happening, damaging facilities, and our abilities to repair them. So that's probably the discussion I'll have when they come out here and talk to us. I'm sorry. That's probably the discussion I'll be having with them, is kind of what the future looks like for these stairs. But they recognize that things happen. There's landslides, there's zoning cutting, there's natural processes going on that have taken out some landings of those stairs. They're not going to pull away funding from me for doing this and tell me to repay. They're going to ask me just, let's work on this and what a solution is to restore it, if that's even possible. So thanks for calling them. I'm sure I'll be talking to them soon, but I'm not overly concerned about anything significant happening to us negatively. It's stuff that's out of our control. You mentioned the wattles and dams that Earth Corps put in. Over the years I've hired Earth Corps for a variety of projects. One of them was creating a vegetation management plan for that park. They did a lot of invasive removal and planting of native plants, as well as after I hired them, you hired them on the adjacent property to the north to do the same thing. They're kind of working actually for both of us, and they're separate contracts at the same time. When we did a lot of removal, there was an unusually high rainfall the following year that did cause some overland flow in the area, and we did put in for that one season the wattles and dams to help slow down that flow so the water would infiltrate like it naturally did throughout the park historically. As we've all acknowledged, yourself as well on the site, when the water comes out of that storm, as it flattens out and fans out in the park, it generally will dissipate and infiltrate and go down. We're having some overflow that was taking out some new planting materials. So what we did was we put in some cardboard, but as well as gathered some branches that were out in the area, wrapped them up, and try to create some blocks to slow down the flows. So we did that as well to try to maintain our plantings, which look like they're doing pretty good out there now. We've finally got control over that. So that's I just wanted to reference the work I've done with Earth Corps, who did that wattles and dam work, which was a totally separate project for my invasive removal and planting as a separate funding source and separate contract and all that. Trying to think where else.
Thank you, Steve. The last thing was the bulkhead.
The bulkhead. Well, I wasn't here when the park was purchased, so all I can rely on are photos that I've seen. And the photos I see, I don't see that bulkhead. I see them clearly in the ones you're showing us now. but I don't see them predating the stairs in any of our photos. So I can't speak for what Shannon and Wilson saw at the time. All I can see is what you've got now and what the report told us. So.
We talk about the area where they're north of the stairs.
Yeah, I mean, what we see now are the logs that are kind of linked and logged together. That is what you're referring to as the bulkhead. That goes from the staircase area kind of to the north, but the shoreline from there south towards the Sears Club. Since I've been here since 2008, I've never seen a bulkhead in that direction. Just like I see these pictures, I don't see any structures going from the stairway to the south. I never have since I've been here, so that's, this is kind of news to us as well. But yeah, all I can say is it's been the condition I've seen it since we've been here in 2008.
I'm honestly a little disappointed about what I didn't hear in the presentation.
Okay.
So, just based on what you're saying now, is this the first time the city is finding out that there's a bulkhead?
No. Well, I guess what I'm saying is we don't believe there's a bulkhead.
Okay.
What I'm seeing in these pictures is a bulkhead. There's a log structure that goes about a third of the way along the shoreline. I don't see a protection of the shoreline like a bulkhead, like at a Sears Park or in front of some residential property, like the Sears Club.
And is this the first time it's been brought to your attention that there is a bulkhead down there?
No, I believe in the past I've heard reference to a bulkhead, but again, our understanding of that bulkhead or historical bulkhead is that northern little section of the park, and definitely not anything protecting the shoreline that we've been losing.
Okay, so given that in the past people have suggested there's a bulkhead, have you gone down to look and see?
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing that's in these pictures, which is two logs locked together, going from the stairway kind of to the north. I don't see any bulkhead protection south of that to the adjacent private property owners, like I see on their property, as John referenced.
Okay, so you're saying those are just logs that naturally occurred there?
No, obviously they got notches cut into them,
Okay.
somebody put them there. I'm just saying that if they're not functioning as a bulkhead, as I would view a bulkhead, if it was my private property and that was what I was calling a bulkhead to protect my property,
Got it. Is there a legal definition of bulkhead? There's been discussed tonight that there's laws around maintaining bulkheads. Is there a legal definition of bulkhead?
I'm not sure if there is one, actually, to be honest with you. And bulkheads have a variety of looks and styles and materials.
The other thing that was sort of blatantly missing, you talked a number of times about natural causes of erosion, but you're not talking about unnatural causes or human causes of erosion. Is this the first time tonight that it's been suggested that there's unnatural causes of erosion? Or
No, I mean, this discussion about the stormwater drain potentially impacting has come up before, and that's why we've hired geoengineers and had technical reports looking into that for the city. But this is a huge watershed that drains down to Eagle Landing Park, not just the couple square blocks that we're referring to, that stormwater drainage that empties into the park. It's a lot bigger watershed than that. It's getting water infiltrating from way east of the park, and so there's a lot of additional man-made things, roadway drainage and that sort of stuff throughout the entire city.
So has there been a study done to figure out how the man-made drainage would impact the park?
Yeah. You want me to go?
Yeah,
Yeah. So what we've been asked to do, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
It's hard to hear what it sounds like out there. So what we were asked to do is do a reconnaissance of the park area and see if we saw anything that was a direct correlation with, at the time that we did that reconnaissance, there was one little earth flow down towards the south end of the park near the old Eagle Landing tree. And so based on that reconnaissance, our conclusion was that there may be some water contributed by the stormwater outfall, but there's lots of other sources of water too, and we could not say definitively that that storm drain was the cause of that one little feature down there. And that's the study that we've done thus far.
When you say that one little feature, you mean?
There's a little earth flow that, have you been to the park? You know where the old Eagle Landing tree was?
A little bit. Are you talking about the little landfall that
It's an
has
earth
pushed
flow.
out the?
Yeah, it's a little earth
bulkhead?
flow that, no, this is at the south end, next to Animals property down there.
Okay.
There's a little earth flow down there. And at the time, it was threatening the Eagle Landing tree, or the perch tree. There we go. And so, and the perch tree was in danger of falling over and could have reached the stairs, so the perch tree was taken down at that point. And that was the feature that was active at that time.
Okay. When you talk about the larger watershed draining into Eagle Landing, how much have we increased the watershed by man-made draining into the Eagle Landing
Increase
Park?
the watershed. The watershed will still be the same.
How much more water are we draining through the park than if the watershed had?
We have not done a water balance to figure that out. It's a very complicated thing that takes a lot more information than we have at this point in time. You want me to talk about the big picture stuff, or?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I should pull this slide.
Or I can draw, sort of. I can sort of draw. I can try my best to explain to you what goes on out there geologically, if you like. That's something you're interested in.
Yeah, well, it looks like that's the root problem. And the reason I say that it looks like it's the root problem is it looks like we had a very stable shoreline for upwards of 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like we had a bulkhead, which maybe they called a bulkhead back when it was made, and at some point in time we started to say, well, those are just logs, because now we have concrete or whatever bulkheads.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like there was a very stable shoreline, a very stable bulkhead, until there was erosion from above, which may have been caused by increasing the water flow through this park. And so I'm just curious, like, how much do we understand how much we've changed the water flow through the park? And then if we're going to try to stabilize this area, what's the plan to do so?
Right. In terms of increasing the water flow to the park, that storm drain has been there for several decades. And when I did my reconnaissance, there was the one small failure. Climate change can increase runoff flow. I don't know how long it's been since the upland was built out, but my guess is that it's been several decades since that upland was built out. So has the impervious surface changed significantly? Probably not. So if there's an increase in the surface water runoff, then it's related to climate change.
Okay, you said that impervious surface hasn't changed, but has the way we've been directing water changed? Have there been curbs put in, or?
I don't know that there has been.
Okay. Are there studies in the works to try to preserve, I mean, even if we do take the stairs out, but we're still pumping water down into this park, are we are there attempts to understand or plans to understand how we stabilize the park, even without stairs?
My understanding is that we're not supposed to stabilize the park.
Okay. Okay, but what about, when you say not stabilize, does that mean if we're flowing man-made water into the park and destabilizing the park, that's okay, but we're not supposed to?
Right, yeah, right.
I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, I think the answer is correct. We aren't supposed to. At the time, I apologize, none of us were here at the time this all began, so we were looking at the same documents that are available to all of you, but what those indicate is that at that time, they knew the storm drainage was there. It was there when we purchased the park, and we were not to alter that. So we wanted it to continue doing what it's doing today, and that's what's in the SEPA documents that the city proposed when we did the park.
Okay, so you're saying that none of the storm drainage has changed such that we're pushing more water toward the park than it was when we built the park?
And I'm looking to our storm drainage engineer. It sounds like there may have been a very minor tweak. No.
I know that there haven't been any significant additions to it. We
In responding to drainage complaints from the public, we often will put in a berm or a small curb or something like in front of somebody's driveway that could redirect the water from their property down the street. There could have been, in all likelihood, there probably was a couple of things like that were put in, but I know that there was no significant increases to that drainage.
So you're saying there might have been 2 berms put in front of people's homes?
I can't say for sure. I'm just
okay.
estimating.
So but your estimate is like less than 5 properties where a berm was added.
I would say from my experience, I would say maybe a couple percent increase.
Okay, in the stormwater
Yeah.
flowing into the park.
Not what I would call significant.
Okay. And was that a known? So when we, I wasn't here when we built the park either, but when we invested all this and got the grant and made agreements, assumed or otherwise, with the public and with the grantee that this would be an asset, did they understand how much water was flowing down into the park?
That's a hypothetical question I can't
Right.
answer, but what I saw in the SEPA documents were a couple statements. One was that water existed there, we know it's there, we're going to leave it there, and it even specifically said we want to allow that to continue feeding the beach, take those natural processes, and again, that was part of the grant. And again, I think Steve mentioned it earlier, and I think he had the quote up there that the city at the time they decided to do this park, I believe it said that maintenance of the stairs is probable and destruction of the stairs is possible. And I recall seeing documents as I've been going through them that are very consistent with that in other areas too of the SEPA process.
Was there any time frame given on?
Actually, they're saying no. I can tell you, I recollect a time frame of a decade or so, but some of those documents no longer exist because they're past their public records destruction date, so I don't have those anymore. But that's just
a
my
decade or
recollection.
so for destruction, or for?
I don't recall. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, you know, I'm personally just saddened. When we moved here 5 years ago, I wouldn't have thought it. Seahurst is such a beautiful park. We spend a lot of time down there. You know, if you ask me to choose, that looks way better. But if you ask me where I've met people, we met more people on Eagle Landing in maybe the 6 months that it was open after we moved here than we've met at Seahurst. And so you have this strange effect going on where you're down there having this shared experience of physical exhaustion, and you can kind of just look at people like you're disarmed and friendly. And I would have never expected that. I never would have said, in order to create a community, we should design a giant staircase, right? But for some reason, that had that effect where I got to meet a lot of people, and my wife got to meet a lot of people. And so it's important to us that we keep that or that we rebuild it. And that's why we're here tonight.
I just have a couple of questions for Galen from Geoengineers. How much water flows through a 12-inch pipe under gravity pressure?
It can be quite a bit.
You're a geoengineer who does this all the time. Can you give me a flow rate?
Off the top of my head, 1,000 gallons a minute.
Sorry, sir. The maximum flow through a 12-inch pipe is far greater than that. I live there. I'm using the word I. I've been measuring the flow coming out of that pipe for 5 solid years.
How have you been measuring it?
With a flow meter.
Okay, very good.
With sensors.
Okay.
And I have measured up to 2,500 gallons a minute coming out of that pipe.
Okay.
And I've watched it flow so far out of that pipe that it measures 15 feet before it even touches the soil. I've watched Steve Romer and his crew come up after that and try to fix all the damage that has happened. It's completely washed out the storm, the culvert, and now they've enlarged it to 2 culverts. And it can't handle that amount of flow, so it's washed out the 2 culverts. So my next question is, do you think that it's logical and sound stormwater management to channel 9 square city blocks of drains to one 12-inch pipe?
I think that's a question that has no relevance here. The issue is that the storm drain exists. Has been there for decades. It was there when the park was created, and the instructions in the SEPA are that you change nothing. So
Okay, all right.
that's an irrelevant question.
Really? Okay, so our other stormwater management guy, I forgot your name.
Dan.
Dan. He mentioned that he's aware of 2 berms, but in fact there's maybe 12 berms. There's no dispute on that. You can walk literally 3 city blocks and you can talk to the neighbors and you can see the berms, and when you talk to the neighbors they will tell you, yeah, my house was settling and we called the city and we had these berms installed, and each time the berm was installed more and more flow was diverted to this pipe. It's not global warming, it's channeling more water to the pipe. I've measured it with a flow meter, and I'm asking you, I understand, sir, that you were hired to come here and figure these things out, but you have not measured the flow, and to my knowledge, right now, you're not capable of measuring the flow without referencing a book, which I understand that, I'm not taking a shot, but I'm asking, please, that you measure the flow coming out of that pipe and dye that water to see where it's going.
Request duly noted. I work at the direction of the city.
Okay.
Thank you.
Last question. Oh, last observation, Galen. You and I know each other from way back. I've worked with your firm for many, many years. I have great respect for you, and I very much appreciate you coming here. When I moved here, Ingrid, where is she? She came to me and she said, thank God we have somebody that might be able to help us with this drain. Will you please monitor this drain? That was in 2012. I started monitoring it, and it was pouring down rain, and there were thousands of gallons of water pouring out of that pipe. But it wasn't going into the park. I was stunned. I was like, how could this be? It goes right into the ground. I went back to Ingrid and I said, Ingrid, I really don't think you have a problem here. That's a lot of water, but the ground is absorbing it all. This rock, this must be some giant tons of rock that is absorbing. It was going in as fast as you could pour it. Well then, a couple of more days go by, I come up my driveway and Steve Romar's trucks are there. Everything's washed out, and I went, what happened? The water was all going into the ground. Now all of a sudden everything's washed out. That's when I learned that over a period of time that ground can't take any more water, and then it flows to the park. So what you see in the park is only a fraction of what actually comes out of that pipe. A lot of that water goes into the ground, and then you only get the overflow. Now there are plenty of videos on YouTube that citizens have taken watching that water go all the way to the beach. So I realize that you are wanting to tell me that you're directed by the city. What I'm asking is, please, can the city direct you to take a closer look at this storm drain and these 9 city blocks and talk to a few people about, locals, about what the changes are. Walk the streets, look at the berms, look at the flow, look at the erosion, and give us, I'm hoping the city will hire you to do that. Thank you.
I just want to have Dan O'Brien, if you can walk over and grab the mouse for a second over there.
Can I ask
This
him a
mouse
question?
is a little bit.
Can I ask this man a question? Yeah.
Go ahead.
If this company will warranty their stuff for life, who cares about the drain?
Well, here's the thing. If they come out and put that in for life, but they see that there's a massive river coming down to erode it,
So they won't warranty it for life.
I would not be reasonably fair to a contractor to say, put those piers in, but don't do anything about the massive flow rate.
I just want to be clear about what you're saying.
But, and the answer is, I don't know. Maybe they will. Nobody's asked.
Problem solved.
I agree. I agree. Oh, there's one thing that before we go, I've got a gift for our city manager. Don't drone me, bro. Thank you. Thank you for holding
I
this.
can't guarantee that, Joe.
It'd just be a target if you wear it.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
That's hilarious.
May I,
So I want to, if I can make it just a comment, you know, the feedback that we're getting and is we're keeping track of everything that's been said. And if we can get more information to answer these questions, that's exactly what we're going to do, and we'll report back to all of you, like I said earlier. So, go ahead.
I'll try to remember where I was before I was interrupted.
You had 2 minutes. Look at the amount of time.
Oh, wait a second. How many minutes did you have?
Just go ahead.
10?
Yeah, just go.
You know what? He's being aggressive. The first thing he read tonight was to be not be aggressive. He's interrupted me 3 times. So, again, back to my questions. So you guys have spent a bunch of time and effort on figuring out how to get rid of the stairs and no time on how to re-engineer and save them? Is that true or not? Okay, so what is your plan for saving them?
No, I just wanted to say no to the fact that we spent a lot of time and effort and resources on getting rid of the stairs. We have not done that.
We're all here tonight for that.
You have to discuss our options and listen to you.
So what are the options for saving?
We're discussing that. We want to hear what you guys have to say so we can regroup and discuss what we've heard, what other areas we might want to look into. That's why we're talking tonight. I'm not coming here telling you.
You don't have any ideas at all?
The reason we're talking to you because we want you guys to believe that we're listening to you before we come up with
Before you decide on what you want to do?
I was relaxed until I got interrupted.
Anyway, I am done. Thank you.
can I interrupt for just a moment? It'll just take me 1 second. I wanted to, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I just wanted to respond about the storm drainage because I'm not sure where the 9 square block idea has come from. So Dan's trying to, I don't know if you can see it, but he's trying to use the mouse to point to which basins lead there. So these basins pick up the stormwater off the street. And so if there's berms along the street, it just better picks up that street, right? And it directs it into those basins. And the area is up there at the top, and it's kind of a lowercase b shape. So he comes along down, put it right on the road so you can see the road. There you go. Those basins right there, and then do a little circle in the D, those right there. Those are the only basins that actually come into the system. So, thank you.
Okay, that's a good picture because people seem to be confused at creating water or adding water or whatever. All the watershed's the same size, gets the same amount of water, and what the structure does, roofs, roads, pipes, whatever, increases the peak flow of water that would have come through the ground anyhow. Once it gets into the park, it dissipates back into the ground, most of it. And I was out there once with John. We didn't walk the whole way. Since then, I've been back a couple times. I was out there yesterday, and the washed out pipes that he mentioned are still there. It overtops the trail when it reaches a peak flow, rather than take out the pipes, I guess. And so the trail's got to be repaired, and a little bit bigger pipe under the trail would probably be a good thing. Below that, it's steep and it erodes, and I don't know what the rules are, I should, but I would suggest you go out there if you're really interested and just walk downhill. That's the way water goes. And if you do, surface water does not go to the stairs. It goes out the service entrance to the south. I've walked the whole distance, and as the further down you go, the more natural, the more debris on the ground, whatever, and the less sand and gravel that shows that it's basically, once it gets into the flatter areas, infiltrating back into the ground. So we're pretty close to what was naturally there. You know, we didn't create water or add water, and I've been an advocate and been involved with putting in rain gardens do more of it. That would help, you know, all these ways we can do it. We've now got low impact development rules we're supposed to follow in this city for additional construction. That would help. There's a lot of things you can do, but, you know, I'm all for that. But in this case, if you walk down the drainage area, which is the blue, well, yeah, the blue line there, it went away.
Oh, sorry.
Did it wash away?
I'm going to help
Washed
point,
away.
but I'm not. He's going to do it from over there for you. So
Okay.
he can point for you there, I think.
It comes, you'll see it right here.
Here, he's got it for you.
If I was taller.
He's got it for you. He's walking.
But it goes out where that yellow thing, that school bus is, whatever it is. Okay? And if you were to go onto the stairs, you go up quite a steep hill, and then you come to the stairs. So it's not surface water that's affecting the stairs.
Yeah.
You can tell by looking, you know, unless there's some way it percolates up, which I don't believe it does, you know. So, you know, we need to separate some of these problems, I think. The stair structure I don't think would be affected. Now, as I recall from a year or two ago, or more, when I was out there on the beach, there are logs that appear to have been a log bulkhead, and I think it could be easily, that could be some of the confusion, is that at a glance you'll think they're logs, and if you look closely, they were actually kind of stacked up as a bulkhead. So that could be the reason we have these arguments over is there a bulkhead or not. It really doesn't matter. Now you can no longer build up or out with a bulkhead. So that one has been overtopped. The stuff that's coming down is going over the top. So whether it's a log or a bulkhead or not is academic. You know, we can't fix it, whatever that means. We can't change it. It's just there. In terms of the wattles, I know when John and I were out there, he said, oh, they don't stop the water. They're supposed to dissipate energy, slow down the erosion, and allow Earth core's effort out there at revegetation to take effect in the long haul. And
I never said that, but you're misquoting me completely, sir.
You told me they failed.
Okay.
Never mind. Okay, I'll take it back. It doesn't matter. But that area is being revegetated, so that you won't need more wattles, I hope, for a while in most cases. Like, we could use some energy dissipation, large woody debris, whatever, in the area from the trail down to where it starts to flatten out. That area is badly eroded, but it's not damaging anything. What else? Oh, I would like to, John mentioned, you mentioned a video of water going all the way to the beach. I'd love to see that trail because I can't imagine how it does that.
You can Google Eagle Landing Stairs on YouTube and pay attention to the 2007 video that Mr. Branson filmed.
I'm sorry.
There's a Google Eagle Landing Stairs.
Okay.
And you will see many videos that have been videoed of this drain, and you will see in his video the water going all the way down. It's dated 2007.
Down to the stairs?
Yes.
Well, how does it get up the hill?
Watch the video. Water rolls down here.
Okay,
let me answer his question.
Okay, well,
He's asking me a question.
I want to give everyone the opportunity to talk here, so go ahead, sir.
Hey, sorry, geoengineer fellow, I forgot your name. It's Galen?
Galen.
Okay, hypothetical question.
Yeah.
In your professional training, would you say it's a good idea to unnaturally saturate a slide-prone area?
No.
Okay. Maya, is the city going to tightline the drain?
We will be talking with council about that.
Okay. Third question is, can you elaborate more on what you mentioned regarding the insurance? Whether or not they will cover the stairwell at all?
They cover. They just provide us advice as far as where our liability lies, and certainly having an active stairway in a place that's subject to continual landslide and tree fall. And tree fall is a big part of it too. Even if we get the stairs to stay, I know it's been mentioned a few times, well, people will be able to get down to the beach, and I'm thinking, well, still having a landslide come down on you isn't going to be pleasant. And so, but that's their only input, is just advice as far as where liability lies.
Okay. And the reason I asked you that was really kind of to just, not you, Gail, was just to kind of bring to light that that's what's happening on this hillside. It's a slide-prone area. We all acknowledge that. However, the city is unnaturally saturating the hillside and basically asking an unstable area to dissipate that flow naturally. Within the geology of the slope itself, there are several clay layers, which are impermeable.
That's true.
So this water percolates down, hits this clay layer, and it gets basically like a viscous layer. And the whole mass of land on top of that layer, which it wants to go anyways, has less resistance. So you get a landslide because of that. So I would say that yes, it's naturally occurring, but I would say also that an unnatural concentration of water that you are expecting to dissipate naturally is a recipe for disaster, which we have seen. We've seen multiple slides in that very, very concentrated area. It's not happening to the north or to the south.
Oh yeah, it's happening to the north. Standering landslide was huge.
Okay, yes, yeah.
So it's happening all up and down these bluffs. This is a natural process that goes on.
And that's a great point. These are naturally slide-prone areas.
Yeah.
So and I'm a layman, I would say that it's probably not a good idea for a city to unnaturally saturate a slide-prone area. And so when I hear the arguments that the SEPA documents say that we acknowledge that this water is there before, and we can't do anything about it because that would go against the SEPA documents. Well, okay, and you mentioned earlier that global warming and climate change might be the cause of this. Okay, well then maybe because of climate change that has happened in the past X amount of years, maybe the city should say, hey, now there are changes that have occurred. So now we should be able to tightline that drain line because there have been changes. So that's just to the argument about the SEPA documents.
Absolutely, and I didn't mean to produce that as an argument. You're absolutely right. That doesn't mean we wouldn't be able to go back and do a new, we wouldn't be consistent with that SEPA, but we would do a new SEPA to tightline it, and that would be what we would be proposing to do is a new environmental process.
Right on. Thank you.
Can I clarify a little bit about your water budget?
Of course.
So this gentleman right here, I don't know your name, was absolutely, this gentleman. Lee?
Oh, Lee.
Lee. Lee was absolutely right. What we do when we create impervious surfaces, we create a higher and a more quickly reactive peak flow. So what goes on is it's still the same amount of water, but it gets to certain places quicker.
It's concentrated.
It's concentrated and it's quicker. Did that answer the question?
It wasn't really a question. I was stating that it's a concentrated, unnaturally concentrated flow of water.
Okay. I thought you were asking if that was correct.
Okay, maybe I'm next. Are you able to enlarge that a little bit because I want to say something about the berms, what people have been talking about?
I don't think so, but we can point for you maybe.
Okay, well, I'm tall, but I still got to be really, really tall. I'm actually on the far corner up there. When I moved about 4 years ago, there's one thing that maybe this helps a little bit, but one thing that I definitely noticed is that when it's pouring rain, all the water basically from the 144 would actually come down and just basically run next to my house and running down the hillside, clearly kind of a creek, very concerning. So I asked the city and said, hey, well, come take a look, and they came. Thanks for that, and they actually put in a berm first after consulting my next door neighbor because that's where it probably would go then. He had lots of trees there. He agreed, saying, okay, well, I don't care that much about it, so it doesn't go all the way down there. So that particular corner does not have any drainage there, so that's just the point I want to make about these berms, and actually also about the amount of water that comes down. I mean, it is very concerning, for these homeowners, we all can concur with that, so.
Sure. Hi there, I'm Charlie Perkins. I live about 2 blocks north of Eagle Landing Park. First, I just wanted to thank members of the Burien City Council and staff that have agreed to have this meeting. Rob Halpin and I had a meeting with Maya 2 months ago, and we broached the subject very briefly, and she agreed that, yeah, community meetings made sense, so thank you for having that. So a couple of things. First, gentleman who spoke earlier, Lee Moyer, talked about the fact that the fall line, as I call it, the water coming down into the park would follow along into the park, down the side, and then rather than going up the hill, if you're familiar with it, right before you get to the top of the stairs, the hillside goes down into the surface access. I was like, yeah, that probably is where the water would go. Until I then saw or remembered that there is a picture, and it was shown earlier, but a little diagram that was on the top of the stairs that shows to educate the public as to what happens in this one. If you're familiar with this one, I saw that and I went, wait a second, that's interesting. It talks about this layer of clay. And so I did a little more research on it, junior geologist that I'm trying to be here, that I found a report, if you Google again, slides in Puget Sound, it takes you to a thing back in 1974 that shows a nice diagram. Sorry, I'm being a retired Boeing engineer. I'm handicapped with not having PowerPoints to support me here, but imagine, if you will, here a picture that shows a cross-section through what looks like our kind of landscape here. And it shows this, in our area, it's called the latent clay layer that is underneath us all, or underneath that area anyway. And then it has the Hesperian sand layer on top of that, and then a layer of Vashon till on top of that. So I see it as Vashon till is what the water goes into, acts like a nice sponge, it holds the water, and then it slowly goes down. When it goes down, it quickly goes through the sand and then to the clay, and then out to the water. But if that layer is interrupted by the drainage situation that we have, then that water can go quickly into the sand, down the sand, as John was pointing out, goes to that clay layer, and then it runs as quick as it can across that clay layer out to the water. Now you see then the map of the Google map of the area here, sorry, that shows, this is going to be a hard one for you to see, but here is the a view of the Eagle Landing Park, and here's the trail that you take, and here's the stairs. Here is where the drainage is, and right heading just straight to the water is where the big slide occurred, which is north of John's property, into the Hanson's property. And then it also shows the stairs here, so it's all very close. That water is going down and going straight up. It doesn't go following the hillside at topography, I believe, as John's pointing out. It just goes straight through that sand. So I think that getting rid of that drainage, routing it through a tight line is the only thing that makes sense to save that area and protect the stairs. One last thing that I support what John is saying and offering the services of as contacts to reinforce the existing stairs. But if that should not come to pass, I question whether there isn't another way you could keep as many stairs as possible. I know you talked about it, but there were at one time 13 landings or piers, as they're called, The lower two obviously gone. The next two are in very precarious condition. The soil has gone down quite rapidly. But in looking at these 2 days ago, beyond that, I didn't see any sign of any damage, erosion. Looks like you could save those. And I think what the public would be looking for is a way to get, they'll find it if you don't create it. They will want a way to get to the beach. So I would think that you could remove those lower two, or get those lower two out of the equation, and then just create a path. Use some of those stair treads that you salvage from the stairs in case they were removed. Build a set of stairs that goes down more quickly, and then a trail to the beach. As an idea that I've got. But first order would be to try to save as much as possible and reinforce those existing last two piers if it's all possible.
Can I comment on the geology really quick? And okay, so I'm not a geologist. The geologist is sitting here, but I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about our experience, even on other projects that I have with other geologists. And that is that that was a beautiful and perfect description of kind of the different layers and the fact that water is hitting certain layers and moving certain ways. The only thing I would add is that it's not a beautiful cake, and they're not even layers, and they're shaped differently, and they point in different directions, and clay could go this way or that, and there could be no clay in places. And so I'm doing another project right now where we drilled down, and we found out what those layers are, and then we drilled 5 feet from there, and some of those layers aren't there. And it makes it really hard. I mean, a mere 5 feet away, and I'm doing a really large project that I need to know where water is going underground. And here I am, and I've drilled 2 expensive holes and very different soil conditions. And so when the water goes down there, we were talking about it earlier, in these places where there's clay and silt and water, doesn't go through them, it goes around them. And I was describing it, and I don't know if this is a good description. I wish I had a whiteboard because that's what we were doing earlier in describing this. But that the pinball comes in the top and it bounces over here and it bounces over there, and it's getting around these clay and silt layers. And to really understand what's happening underground with the water is much more complex. And I appreciate everybody's desire to want to know that, but it is such a hard thing to know with that kind of complexity underground. So thank you.
Could I just rebut that
Sure.
or at least add a little bit more information to it? So again, my apologies for not being able to see this, but I did walk up the area just to the south of the stairs. So you see the stairs there, and the little green dot is that area that was the birch tree slide of which referred to. But you can see there that there is a clay layer. It's quite obvious.
There are lots of clay layers in that.
So and it's about the right altitude, the right elevation, I should say, to where that stairs showed.
Okay, so thank you. So we have 5 minutes here. I do want to keep everybody on time. So let's let.
My name is Larry Cripe. I've lived in the community for about 35 years, and I live on, I put the point on 23rd Avenue Southwest. I live on the bluff in a critical slope area, and my neighbor, Adele Comfort, approximately 12 years ago, had one of the largest slides that we've seen up until recently. And it was due to surface runoff of water. And we did have the berms put in to re-divert the water down the hill, and that was approximately 12 years ago. And we had the geologist out, and then we tightlined 3 of our houses on the bluff, or tightlined together with all of our rainwater permitted to put back up to the street into the sewer, or into the storm drain. But the geologist told us at the time, it's the clay layers. And what happens, he says, it's not your surface water here that's causing the problem. And after I saw what happened, I believed him. It was up streets behind us. It's soaking into the ground, and then it runs, it hits the bluff where we live, and it's better than 30 feet straight off my bluff, 50 feet from my house. But we have slowed that process down. But when it blew out, there was literally a river of water coming out of the side of that hill. But the geologist told us that water is from way up here behind you, seeking a level and running
And I love taking my grandkids up and down those stairs. I love doing it. I love doing it myself. But the first day I went down those steps after they opened and I saw those pilings in that hillside, I said it's only a matter of time with all that water seeping down in and around those pillars and stuff that we're going to have the problem we have today. Now, I don't know what all this water, because there is storm drain problems up there in that area. And if we can fix it, that'll be fantastic. Whether we can ever save the stairwell and put it back in, if we could, I'm in favor of that. But it is a problem that, and I'm glad to see that everybody shows up to talk about this, and if we can get it fixed, it'll be great. But I was surprised they lasted as long as they did, and I don't know if we can save it.
Okay. So we got time for one more question.
One more?
One more.
So you spoke of erosion at the beach caused by tidal action. So why is the hillside pouring out water right above this new slide on those staircases? So it's pretty obvious to me it's stormwater. And stormwater being excessively dumped on the slope, causing these clay areas to break down and then come out at the bottom, causing erosion. And I've lived in the area since 1982, and I live at the top of that circle up there. And I count like 12 blocks plus of water being directed into the drain when I do my math. Somebody else said 9. I believe it's 12. As far as the bulkhead down there, it's actually a box bulkhead, 2 courses of timbers filled with materials, and it's very sturdy. It's been lasting many, many, many years. So, and then where the stairs came to the beach, there used to be a bulkhead there. You can see a pier, so it's eroded out. So, one time that was armor, and now time has taken its toll on the end of that thing, and it's gone away. So I would encourage the city to hardline that line in, stabilize the slope, and get that water off that slope, and let normal process of ground water from natural sources in the area do its thing, and it probably won't erode.
Thank you. So listen, I want to thank everybody for commenting and coming here tonight. Our plan is, what I believe, would you be willing to have another one of these when we get some more recommendations and are thinking about some options, that we come back and we'll do another one of these sessions to present some of those
To address the
information.
options that were brought up?
Pardon?
Sorry, to address the options.
Yes, not only the feedback that we have, but what I'd like to do is put this online, because we've kept information, questions that have come up today. We'll address those and put that online so that people can see it if we have more information. As we get closer to identifying options or considerations, we'll come back to you and have another meeting like this to do this. We will make ourselves available. I'd like to stop on time, I think, to respect everybody's time. Our staff and will be here after the meeting if you want to have any individual questions. But again, thank you for coming, and we'll stay in touch, and your feedback is important, and there's ideas that came up, and we really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.